Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. All right, on today's podcast, we have a friend that I met a long time ago, probably like 19 years ago, and he was what they call an RSM, I guess, and he was working for SunPower, and he was the most powerful guy in the solar industry in the Bay Area because he had the most efficient solar modules and everybody wanted them. And it was like, wow, we're going to have a meeting with Aaron Thurlow today. That's really important, man. You better like shave extra and, comb your hair because we don't want to upset Aaron Thurlow. And then I've seen Aaron all over the place in different conferences. And one time I remember Aaron running into you at the United Airline Lounge over in San Francisco, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, years ago.
Yeah. And I go into that lounge all the time. Like most people go when they're just waiting for a flight, but I always go when I come home. And then I was like, I'm getting a meal. And I was like, I'm paying for this credit card. I'm going to get my money's worth.
Good for you.
So like per flight, I have like more lounge visits than everyone, I think, because I always, it's just like you get off the plane and you're hungry and, you're going to go home. You're going to be too late for dinner. You don't want to stop for a restaurant and all that. So that's, that's the way I roll.
There you go. Well, I'm glad you're getting some use out of that. Yeah, I was going to say back in SunPower Days, I actually had hair. So I was combing it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember we were just all like, we were intimidated by, the powerful dude.
Oh, man.
And I remember, too, you got a different job. I think there was a lot of turnover with that job. I think they put pressure on you guys and they made you guys put pressure on everybody else. And I remember it was like we had to like say how many modules we were going to get next month and fill out these spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. And then you went and got a job at some other company that was doing what we now call an optimizer, I guess.
Yeah, this is a great recap of the early days of my solar career. But no, actually, I left SunPower. So I helped bring SunPower's technology to market. It was amazing. We went 0 to number 1 in 5 quarters and peaked, I think, around 35% market share, at least when I was there, which was awesome. And I'll come back to SunPower because I think what I'm doing now is actually there's some synergies or analogies. But I left SunPower because I had an opportunity to go launch on a global basis versus with SunPower's on a domestic basis, a new technology, which was microelectronics for the solar industry. And you mentioned power optimization or power optimizers. And that was awesome because I came in and it was a different industry for me, semiconductors. And there were a lot of technical people and they're like, this is our buck boost, DC converter and technology, and then 10 other things that were technical terms to describe it, technology. And I felt like, gosh, nobody's going to understand that in the market. We need to change this. So we actually came up with power optimization, power optimizers, DC optimizers, and we went out and we branded that globally as a technology category. And even though National got out of the business, that product category stuck. To me, that was a huge success for the industry and a win. And now there's some...
What was the name of that company that was doing that? I can't remember the name of that company that were doing the optimizing. They're not around anymore, right?
Yeah, so it was National Semiconductor. And we went out under a brand called Solar Magic.
That's it, Solar Magic. And National Semiconductor is... What is it that they do? They're just like a big semiconductor company, right?
They're a big semiconductor company, and that was really an interesting project because they developed this chipset that did just what I said, which was this DC buck boost technology. And the idea there was that you were offsetting the mismatches between 2 solar modules, 3 solar modules, all the solar modules that were in the string. So it was kind of like the flashlight analogy back in the day when we had the bulbs that took a lot of energy and you had like 4D batteries in your big flashlight, it wasn't an LED. And one of those batteries would be, close to dead and it would pull all the other ones down. So same thing with solar modules, and this is getting a little bit technical, and you know this better than me because you do all the training. But if you have, at the time, the strings weren't that big because we didn't have 1500-volt systems. But if you had 10 modules in a string and one of them was shaded, and this still exists today, but the idea was that that one that shaded would pull the performance down. So then you put this Solar Magic device on, or power optimizers. People still use them today, obviously. Solar Edge is alive and well. But you would then mitigate the module that was pulling the others down in the string. So it's pretty cool technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was before anybody ever heard of an optimizer or anything like that. I think
Correct.
That might have even been before or right around the same time Enphase came out, something like that.
Yes. Yes. So it was around the time that Enphase also launched microinverter, and National actually had both technologies. And, we made a decision to go out with the DC optimizer technology.
And that was way before rapid shutdown or anything
way
like that.
before rapid shutdown.
And I remember
Yes.
when they were coming out with it, they kept it a secret. They're like, there's something coming. And I think it was and because you were doing it, everybody knew who you were in the industry, at least locally at that time. Everybody was like, oh, what's Aaron up to? It must have been important to get him away from SunPower and all this kind of stuff. And it was important, but maybe other companies ran with it or something. And it was kind of early too for doing all that stuff. I remember there was some video that had these little carts or something, and they were moving. They were powered by the sun, like these little sun powered carts. And then the one that had Solar Magic on it would keep going, and the other one would slow down or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's a big company. So we had a healthy marketing budget and a great marketing team there. And I think, at that moment in time, actually it was super important for the industry, right? To go out and create a brand category or a new technology category for the industry.
Yeah, so you've had lots of different things that you've done in the industry. And so I don't know if you wanted to go to where you are now or talk about some of the other interesting stuff in the past. And then you're welcome to come on here and talk about stuff in the future too, because there's a lot of stuff that we won't cover, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, I think I've been fortunate to get into this industry early. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background here and just say that I was studying climate change in the mid to late 1990s and stumbled upon photovoltaics as an energy solution that hadn't scaled, that could be a solution to transitioning energy.
So the mid to 1990s, that's kind of early before people were even talking about it. How does that coincide with Al Gore making it something in the public consciousness? Was he one of the people that told you about it, or did you tell him about it?
No, I didn't tell him.
Do you talk to Al Gore every day?
He had published a book. And I certainly read his book. And so he was talking about this stuff really early. I also happened to go to school at UC San Diego, where they had Scripps Institute of Oceanography. They also had a supercomputer, one of 3 in the world, I believe, at the time. So they were able to run, climate models, and they were getting...
And that's kind of equivalent of today's iPhone.
Exactly. So now everybody's got one in their pocket. But at the time, these early models were still very, sophisticated in terms of trying to model out, the data that they had. And anyways, they were, as I recall, I believe they were around 97% certain at the time that there was, an issue. And since I was more on the policy business solution side, I felt like, well, that's good enough for me. Let's go find a solution to this. Of course, it was, I don't know how many years later that they kind of came out and said they were 100% sure. And I think, now obviously we have lots of models, we're starting to see impacts. And, I think with solar, this technology was really, had been developed. I mean, I'm trying to remember in the 50s, but even before that, you can go back to, photovoltaic effect was discovered well over 100 years ago, in the 50s. I think the Bell Labs, which you've probably spoken about on your podcast before.
Yeah, they invented the rectangular solar module, crystalline silicon.
Yeah, exactly. So there's even in that era, there was a lot of, solar was out there. There was a lot of uses for off-grid telecommunications, and the big players too were in this. Siemens, who had purchased from Arco, Atlantic Richfield, and then Siemens ended up selling to Shell around that time period as well, early 2000s, I believe. British Petroleum got in and bought a company called SolarX around that time period. So, even though it was a very small industry, it was pretty healthy in terms of large companies in it, and I think really seeing the future. So if you think about grid tie, solar, and now I'm going on a little history lesson and departing here, but grid tie solar really started in the 1990s, Japan, and then the early 2000s, Germany, California. So and I'm sure you've spoken to others on your podcast about this, but it's really a pretty fascinating.
No, it's all good to know, and it's okay to repeat things.
Yeah. Well, it's fun to talk about because I do think like where we all came from and how we got here is really important. There's a lot of lessons that have been learned along the way, and it's been amazing growth. I think it's since I got in, it's probably 10,000x, which has just been incredible. And I've been going back to kind of my career. I've been really fortunate to get involved with a number of amazing companies, and my premise has always been that I like to get involved with companies that I believe have the ability to continue to expand the industry in some form. And a lot of that has been through technology. So, when I joined SunPower, is coming out of Kyocera, which was the top 3 solar module manufacturer at the time. And what really attracted me to SunPower was that they had a step function increase in efficiency. So fast forward to where I am now at Caelux, and we're enabling the same thing, which is a step function increase in efficiency.
So what do you mean by that too, step function? Maybe we could explain that.
So I view it as something that's not incremental. So if we look at the history of solar, it's been these small kind of incremental improvements in efficiency. And you can go way back when silicon was really expensive and solar modules really expensive. And we had there were solar modules that I've seen in the past that used round solar cells. Well, that's because when you pull a single crystalline ingot, it comes out as a cylinder, gets pulled up this way as a cylinder. And it was very expensive to waste that silicon. So they would just use the whole wafer.
Instead of cutting off the edges and then giving you a greater module efficiency. Yeah.
Correct. Exactly. There's been a lot of scale up in the industry, a lot of cost reduction. People talk about that all the time. It's really incredible, the cost curve that this industry's seen. But if you think about from an efficiency perspective, in like 50 years, we've really only gone from maybe 14% module efficiency to 24% module efficiency on the upper end. So maybe 10%. What I would refer to as a step function is like a movement instead of a quarter point or half a point of efficiency would be a move of like 3%. So when SunPower came into the market, they came in with a solar cell built on a monocrystalline wafer. And not only was it built that way, but it was also with a back contact, which meant that you didn't have all these grid lines on the front of the cell. So the whole front of the solar cell was usable or could create a photovoltaic effect, right? So that's the beauty of the back contact. Most of the modules in that era, you could buy a monocrystalline module, but it was more expensive. So most of the modules, which we don't see very much at all these days, were multicrystalline modules, which was you took all the scrap from silicon and you threw it into a cast block and you melted it all together. But what happened is you have multiple crystalline grain boundaries form. And so it looked really cool, but you had all these, it was called multicrystalline. So you had a square now, which is great. So you could have more module efficiency, but you had much lower solar cell efficiency because multicrystalline. So you had all these grain boundaries that would, keep the efficiency low. And, so SunPower comes out and I think that, is at least 3% more efficient in absolute efficiency. So the best module at the time was like 17%. SunPower had it 20%.
Yeah, I remember that was like a big deal. And it was like, they'd sort them out though. And it was really hard to get the 20% efficient unless you could bribe Aaron Thurlow. No, I'm just kidding. But.
Well, the volumes were much lower, those days, right? So the first SunPower factory was 100 megawatts and it was 4 25 megawatt lines, right? Pretty limited production by today's standards.
But back then it was probably was it the biggest or something, like it was.
It was, it was sizable from what I recall. And I think the market really did switch very quickly to the folks that could get, as you mentioned, that they could get SunPower switched very quickly. And the reason is that efficiency is, I think, and this holds true today, is really the single biggest lever to driving down costs for your whole system. That was one reason. But the other reason was just simply that you needed that efficiency, especially on residential roofs. So this was SunPower we launched into the residential space, and then later on commercial. It was pretty shortly after that, but into commercial. But those are, space constrained applications. And then SunPower had a good run in utility for a while too. So if I look at what we're doing today at Caelux, we are really changing the industry again from an efficiency perspective, because what we do is we do a new technology called Perovskite. We deposit that Perovskite on the underneath side of the top glass that sits in a solar module. And now you have two power generation layers. The top glass, which before didn't do anything other than just protect the module, now acts as a power generation layer, and the silicon solar cells below act as a power generation layer. And the initial commercial product for this technology will provide a 3% absolute increase in efficiency. So if you were at 24% module efficiency, you go to 27%. The good news is, with this technology, the limit isn't 27%. You're going to easily surpass 30% as the perovskite technology continues to develop and the efficiencies of that technology continue to increase. So it's really exciting. And, I feel like there's a lot of parallels to what I did at SunPower in terms of helping launch back contact into the market, what I did at National Semiconductor in terms of launching an entirely new, product technology category. Perovskites is a new technology category. A lot of people haven't heard about perovskites still within the industry. I think that is changing as there's more interest. But the easiest way to think about perovskites is it's kind of very similar to like a thin film. It is a thin film that's deposited, and it can be deposited on other, types of surfaces, not just glass. Like you can do flexible substrates. So there's a lot of cool applications very similar to thin film. I also, as you know, spent time launching a 6 thin film technology into the market called Styon. I feel like this opportunity to have at Caelux to commercialize Caelux's technology pulls on a lot of the previous experience I've had throughout my career, whether it's, launching thin film or launching high efficiency or doing, new technology at National Semiconductor. But what I really like about this technology and the approach that Caelux has on depositing onto the top glass and having a double power layer module is that it's simple and it's cost effective and it has the ability to scale. And I think if we look at back contact, which is a phenomenal technology, the biggest...
And by the way, that was developed by Dick Swanson.
Yes.
And he's the founder of SunPower.
Yes.
And I had him on the podcast here not too long ago, this year. That's April 7th, 2026. And I was super honored to have him on there. It was kind of a funny story. He joined NorCal Solar, and I saw his phone number. I called him up, and we did the podcast over a phone call.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is so great.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. He's like a superhero. He came up with Swanson's law, but he's also very modest and not a salesperson type, because you say like, oh, didn't you come up with Swanson's law? And he'll deny it. And you go like, didn't you invent the back contact? And he kind of denies it, but we all know that he pretty much did. Like if there's a way out, he would not take credit for something, So
yeah. Well, he's a phenomenal person. And, I feel really honored that I was able to spend time, at SunPower and get to work on that technology. I think that, so where the industry's evolved to, though, from a cost perspective, back contact, and I know there's folks that are still working on this and believe that they will get there.
And didn't their patent run out or something like that? And then other people could do it? Something like that.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's part of what's going on now. But you still have a situation where like back contact's not used on utility scale solar. And then if you go and you ask yourself, so why is that? The reason is cost, right? Even though it provides this increase in efficiency, that increase in efficiency is not cost competitive in that application. Still very cost competitive, I would argue, and very well warranted for residential solar and space constrained commercial solar, where you have higher labor costs, higher installation costs, where you need more energy density, and there's value there. What I really like about perovskite on glass is that the cost structure allows you to compete in all segments, and it will work really well for utility scale. In fact, we have models that were third-party validated that show a 20% reduction in LCOEs on utility scale.
So that's 20% reduction in the cost of energy, pretty much. Levelized
Yes.
cost of energy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. I should explain that term, but that's phenomenal. I mean, that's really amazing. I mean, I think, as an industry, we're all, trying to find 1% or 2%. So 20% is massive. And that will allow the technology to scale. And when you are able to scale, then you're able to be even more cost competitive, right? So this is what gets me really excited about this technology, is that it delivers so much benefit to continuing to expand this industry, and really making solar, I think, the dominant source of low-cost electricity on a global basis.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. Yeah, one thing I kind of like about your technology with Caelux, which also, by the way, I studied botany in college, and that the Caelux was the outer side of a flower, like the green part that kind of protects your rose or whatever. So that's probably where you got it. And then you put the word lux after it for light, I imagine. That's probably where that name came from. But it's like you're selling a different piece of glass for a solar module. So you're not really competing with other solar module companies. You're giving them a different kind of glass that makes energy. Is that right?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, this is what's really exciting, is that all the billions and tens of billions of dollars in CapEx that have been brought into the industry. If you think about all the recent manufacturing that's been spurred in the US and that we've developed in the US, we are just plug and play. Instead of using standard top glass, you can use Caelux glass. And now you have a double power layer module.
Yeah, why are some people so stupid they're not even using Caelux glass? I can't believe it.
Well, we're not quite available yet. I mean, we're inches away, but right now we're in testing mode. So we just announced a 5-year, 3 gigawatt partnership with a manufacturer in Puerto Rico called Solex. And we are shipping early, or what we call pre-commercial Caelux glass to select kind of partners globally, so not just in the US. And so we're really gearing up for it to become available, commercially. But I think you'll see a lot of folks a lot of module manufacturers move in this direction as we move forward. So I think if we come back in a couple of years and people aren't using it, then we can maybe use some choice words for them.
So they're not so stupid as I thought.
Yeah.
I wonder, it's a piece of glass. And I had, I guess, your CEO, Scott Graybill, on a while ago, and we talked about this. And if people wanted to know, the date was, and we'll put all this in the show notes, but that was on December 22nd, 24. And so, but it's a piece of glass, and they can custom make it for like different solar modules and stuff like that. Could you put every different thing together? Like, could you have bifacial with, a piece of Caelux glass on both sides? Maybe that wouldn't be the cost effective way of doing it, but could you?
I think it's possible, but it's not something that we focused on, early on.
Could people also use it for like BIPV, like a solar window?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, we haven't focused there, but this technology has so many applications. What we focused early on is Like if you call me up today and you're a module manufacturer and you say, hey, I've got a PERC product line, and I've got a TopCon product line, and I've got an HAT product line. Now, there's not very many companies that actually have all three, but there's a lot of companies that have two, at least two, right? We're cell agnostic, and we customize the glass to whether you have a PERC cell or HAT cell or TopCon cell. So we can work with all those technologies. And if you have a different cell layout or different cell configuration than one of your competitors, we can customize to kind of match, if you will, the way you have your cells laid out. And this is really kind of pretty phenomenal, right? Usually companies would come to market with only being able to do one configuration. But we have flexibility. We've built flexibility into our technology in the way that we process so that we can do multiple different technologies out of the gate.
Cool. And then I guess too, there's Perovskite and there's multiple layers. And some people don't know this, but like you have different technologies and they capture different parts of the spectrum of light. So there's some parts of the spectrum of light that Perovskite can catch well that crystalline silicon can't. And so you combine them together in different layers and then you're catching both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good, I'm glad you brought that up. So we have tuned our band gap in the perovskite to capture as much of the spectrum that, the perovskite's good at and allow as much of the spectrum that the silicon's good at to kind of optimize both layers in a double power layer module.
So you say the word band gap. Have you ever been to Solar Battle of the Bands?
Yes.
And so why don't they have a band called Band Gap?
Maybe we should start one.
I think we should do that. Yeah, what instrument do you play?
I DJ. So I've got turntables as my instrument.
Okay. All right. And I'll do a little singing and guitar playing and we're going to win.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, next year.
The Band Gap.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So you're kind of smart. Maybe there's a way to explain band gap, or would you be good at explaining what a band gap is to somebody that is not a super scientist?
Not off the cuff, but I think Scott, our CEO, CTO, or founder, would be exceptional at making that simple for people to understand. I guess the way I would just think about it is if you have a spectrum of light that's kind of this continuous, you think of the rainbow, there's different colors. And maybe you think about those different colors, and hopefully I'm not getting this completely wrong.
So you've got rainbow, we're open-minded, pride, all that stuff.
Well, yeah, exactly. I guess it was Pride weekend this past weekend.
Perfect timing.
If you took the rainbow and you said, okay, well, I've got this band of color spectrum or this band of the spectrum, this band of the spectrum, I think it means where are you kind of putting the dividing line?
So crystalline silicon goes for more of the red side of the spectrum into the infrared, and it catches a little bit of that blue light. And one of the reasons why I know that is because the older crystalline silicon solar cells would look blue on the roof, and that's because they couldn't do anything with that blue light. So it'd be better to just get rid of it instead of heating up the module. And so what about perovskite?
Yeah, so you're absolutely correct, Sean. The perovskite we have kind of tuned to capture as much of that kind of blue, even if you think about like purple and that part of the spectrum.
Does that make it Democrat?
I wouldn't call it that way.
No, okay.
I think we're
It's capturing the blue light, the red light. So if you're capturing the red light, you're more Republican, and if you're capturing the blue light, you're more Democrat, I guess. So that makes crystalline silicon kind of like the MAGA solar, and then perovskite is sort of like the Democrat Obama solar or whatever.
Well, I have two responses to that. One, so the beauty of Caelux technology is that we're bringing everybody together, right? We're agnostic. We're neutral.
And that's the way we got to do it. Bring them all together.
Yeah, exactly. Really, energy is not something that should have political lines. Like everybody in society benefits from energy and clean energy production. The other, I would say, is a little bit political, which is just that, the blue, so we're doing more of the blue spectrum, but we're also a leader in this technology in the Western Hemisphere. And this is a technology that is giving the US a leadership position, again, in solar technology. And a lot of the leadership in the last 15 years has converted over to China technology.
Isn't it kind of crazy? We developed all this stuff with all of our, our lab, whatever you want to call it, Siri, NREL, Lab of the Rockies. We come up with all this technology. We spend billions of dollars, and then we give it away. And it's like good that we gave it away, but we didn't do it ourselves,
Yeah, and I think this is really an opportunity for the US to kind of get back on top in the technology, or not even necessarily to get back on top, but just to have a more diversified industry when we think about supply chain and we think about technology. I think of national security of importance because, we're talking about a significant amount of energy production going forward will come from solar. That's the trajectory. And so I think it's really important for the US not only to have a manufacturing base here, which we've done a good job rebuilding, but to also have a technology base and a really strong technology platform. So I think that's, another way to look at your kind of blue-red. But I think, I've always said that solar's kind of agnostic. I mean, it does what it does, right? It produces electricity. It produces it very cost effectively, and it's a clean technology that's able to expand quickly. Like, look at how fast we've had scale come.
Yeah. Like in Texas, which is, speaking of red, they're like the most red votes, I guess, of any state. And they are putting solar in faster than any other state right now. And it's kind of funny too, because, Texas was famous for energy back in the old energy economy with all their oil wells and all that kind of stuff. And now it's all the solar stuff. In fact, I wonder if they're taking more energy from solar now than they are from oil wells. I have no idea.
I don't know, but two things I'll say. One is, like, we're just, I guess, doing a good job making points that this is really not like one political party versus the other. Like, solar really should not be, affiliated with a political party. It's just something that we all need. And the second, on the oil thing, is I went, like, in graduate school, we worked on a paper looking at solar's trajectory and comparing it to barrels of oil. And, it's so long ago, I don't remember all the details. But yes, I think at some point, we are going to have more energy production come from solar potentially than barrels of oil coming out of the ground. And I think you're starting to see, like, the Middle East is making a big push into solar. And I think people around the world really see this, right? That this is coming, and solar is going to be a dominant source of energy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's less expensive, It's independent. They don't have to, go to the other side of the world. And, it's like they're not bringing solar modules through the Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what part of the world you are in, where you're probably trying to get your solar modules from.
Yeah. I wonder, that would be an interesting thing to see if they're bringing some solar modules through there.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Because if you're trying to get, like, solar to, like, I don't know. I can't remember if Dubai is like north or south of Hormuz or east or west or whatever. But, like, if you have to get through Hormuz to get to Dubai from China, I think you might, then it would be all about the solar,
Yeah.
Getting the solar in there.
Well, I think I'm not a geographical, expert. I probably should have studied those maps, but I think that we do have a lot of solar modules on container ships going all over the world. And I am a big proponent, have been for a long time, of regionalized manufacturing or localized manufacturing. I think it makes a lot of sense now, especially now that the industry is at scale. If you look at, how much solar the US is deploying, it makes a lot of sense to have the manufacturing here and have the supply chain here. And I think that's starting to occur elsewhere, in the world. And going back in my career, I remember doing costs, talking about what are all the costs, benefits of having localized solar. And there's a lot of stuff that people don't think about in terms of, and maybe they're thinking about now, but this is going back to like 2013, 2014 timeframe when we were looking at this and, what are all the end logistics costs and other, externalities associated with moving solar models all over the world. So it's super exciting to see this kind of on a regional basis and a localized basis. At Caelux, we're planning on building, our manufacturing plants, not just in the US, but around the world in these local regional markets. So I think it's just a way that things are going to emerge in this industry as we continue to grow and mature.
This podcast is brought to you by Sunlight. Sunlight makes you shine. I'm looking at a map right now, and yeah, the Strait of Hormuz is, you have to get through that to get to all those places like Kuwait, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, and Dubai. And I remember one time sitting on the beach in Dubai looking across, like, I know Iran's right there. And so they have to get the solar modules in through there. That's kind of weird. Like, I don't know, that would be just an interesting article or something for some solar magazine to talk about. Are they having a shortage of solar modules going in there?
Yeah. Well, I'll start asking some folks. I didn't think about it, but probably,
Which is why they need to have greater efficiency solar modules so they don't have to bring as many solar modules through the Strait of Hormuz. And so that's why they have to use your technology, Aaron Thurlow.
We should sign you up to go sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So is there, like, I know that you know a lot about technology and different parts of the spectrum of light, but do you think in the future we'll have even a third layer of something?
Well, I think if you look at even going back, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, we had triple junction solar cells, and there are triple junction solar cells that have, essentially 3 different layers.
Is that pretty much just in the lab, though?
No, these are used for space.
Oh, for space. Yeah.
I think that space is another really exciting opportunity for perovskite technology. And Caelux has been in orbit. It's an area that we also have our hands in and see a lot of potential in the future. And, so if you go back to kind of traditional triple junction space solar cells, they're very, very expensive. And you may recall in, a little more than 20 years ago, there were a bunch of companies in Silicon Valley using these ultra high efficiency solar cells with ultra high concentration. So like 200x concentration, so that onto like a little tiny high efficiency solar cell.
Oh yeah, like concentrating and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So concentrating PV, and because silicon was really expensive in one sun kind of technology, which is like just a standard module.
Yeah. With just one sun, lasers with just one sun.
Yeah. But these,
and then you got to reflect it to get multiple. Yeah.
Yeah. So these cool lenses, right, that would like concentrate 200x onto this small little cell. So I think...
Do you know the Dumbarton Bridge? I'm sure you do, because you're in the Bay Area. Yeah. Do you know that concentrated solar on there?
There's a site. Yeah, there's a concentrating solar site off the site. I think that was Sol Focus, but I may be wrong.
That's cool that you would know about that.
Companies. But yeah, no, look, there's been a tremendous amount, going back to the technology discussion, there's been a tremendous amount of really great technology research that's happened. I hope that we start to have more of that in the US again, because there's still a lot of great ideas. And, ultimately, what's really exciting to me here is the cost story, right, behind perovskite. So you have the efficiency plus the cost story. And I think that is kind of the ultimate end game for solar, is how do you break through that? So silicon has a 29% efficiency limit, physical, it's just physics, right? So it's not going to go beyond 29%. So all of a sudden you add in this second layer with perovskite, and now you can blow through 30%, which historically was these other materials. So these high efficiency triple junction solar cells, part of the reason why they're so expensive is the materials are really expensive, and perovskite is an inexpensive material. Silicon at this point is an inexpensive material. Combine the two, you're still inexpensive, but your efficiency is super high. And so if we now look at space, and part of the reason why space has kind of really taken off is because companies like SpaceX have really worked on getting the cost down, and cost is a big thing. And then the other part that's driving, or that why perovskite's become a really interesting technology for space, is perovskite is a very, very thin layer, and you can put it on really lightweight materials. And so you have a super lightweight technology that's inexpensive and produces, great energy or electricity. It's perfect for that application.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to some space person one time, and it wasn't about like efficiency, it was about weight. Because once you can get it out there, it's like just overcoming Earth's gravity is what it's about.
Yeah, so there's this weight, efficiency ratio that comes into play. And so I think that's really an exciting emerging opportunity for perovskite. And yes, this is a super exciting, technology that I think is going to do a lot, for across all these different applications.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. So perovskite, you want to explain a little bit about like the elementary school version of what it is? So like a lot of us are familiar with the crystalline silicon. And so we've got crystalline silicon and it's a crystal and it's like a semiconductor and it's sort of like a diamond, but instead of carbon, it's silicon. And so then you've got perovskite, and you probably know more about that than I do.
Well, I know a little bit. I'll say this, going back to my national semiconductor days, I think about how we simplified the nomenclature. And I think that that's still a possibility for perovskite, although a lot of people have already kind of talked about it. It's out there. But it is a little bit of a tricky thing to explain. And there's different applications. There's different ways people are doing it. But the way I would explain it is like perovskite itself is like refers to really like a crystalline structure. And then what you can think about is all the companies that are working on this have slightly different types of solutions that they make that form this crystalline structure that is able to create the photovoltaic effect, similar to, a solar cell where you're converting sunlight into electricity. That's kind of as simple as I can probably make it.
Okay, cool. But it's just like it's got different, it's got a different chemistry. So it's still a crystal.
Correct.
It's got different stuff in it.
That's right.
And it's super, super thin, so it doesn't take a lot of materials.
That's right. Yeah. So it's super thin, which means that it's very efficient on the material usage side.
Like as far as like, is it thinner than a piece of paper?
Yes. Yes.
And maybe a piece of paper, I'm not sure, but maybe that's like a normal solar cell, like silicon,
well,
something like that.
Silicon's getting really thin these days. I don't know the actual thickness, but we know that if we go back, 20 years ago, the solar cells were much thicker. And that's one thing the industry's done a really good job in terms of cost reduction is reducing the amount of silicon.
I got a crazy, stupid question. Do you think they'll ever figure it out so you can take like a solar cell, which is essentially is like a semiconductor, and then also make it do computing at the same time that the sun's hitting it? Maybe someday in the like 100 years or 200 years.
I don't think that's a crazy idea. I'm not a physicist. So if I feel like thermal management would be a key constraint to figuring that out, just because like normally you probably don't want to put a computing chip in the sun, right?
But computer chips, they get pretty hot anyway.
They get pretty hot, but like they usually have a way to like do thermal management. So maybe if you saw the thermal management, you could do, 2-in-1.
Maybe it would compute. You'd have to turn it down. It'd be a little bit slower unless you're in Antarctica. But I don't know. It just seems like a weird future, 2226 type of thing, the year 2226. That's my bet. I'll bet you on it.
Oh, you're looking like 200 years out. No, I think that could happen much faster.
Okay.
I don't think it's too far-fetched, actually, but I think the question is, would you be better off just having the computer chips in the data center with all the redundant, I guess
the thing is, though, that with the solar, we have so much more of it. It's like we have like square miles of it or something.
Yes.
So that's a lot more than you would have like with a data center with, your little small tiny chips. So maybe that extra space would compensate for the heat losses and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea for sure.
All right, cool. I think we covered a lot of cool stuff, but I'm sure we could probably talk for like 10 hours, 9 to go. What do you think?
I think we could for easily and still have a lot more to talk about, right?
Okay. So you have the link. So anytime you want to come on, just go on and
okay, cool.
We just do it again.
Yeah, awesome.
And any other things you want to say that'll be like your famous words?
Oh my gosh, my famous words.
Like, where do we get some of this Caelux, man? I need to get some.
Yeah, give me a call. Like, I think that one thing we know well is that high efficiency, which I've already said, but it's the single biggest lever we have to continue to drive industry expansion and drive down costs. So if we think about, where we are today with a cost structure on a utility solar system, and I'm not an expert in this, but the solar module itself is becoming a smaller and smaller percentage of the overall cost of a system. So if we go back to when the days of SunPower launching into the market, a solar module was over 50% of the cost of a system at the time.
Yeah, I remember that was what we were doing. We were trying to get it from you.
Yeah, exactly.
What were you selling it for? I'm trying to remember. Was it like $4?
Oh, it was like $4 plus a watt, at the time. And so if you think about how the industry and solar modules and in a lot of components too have fallen, but the one thing that doesn't tend to fall in cost are like commodities. So land, labor, steel, glass, and I'm sure that some people will correct me on some of this, but these kind of the commodities, if you think about what's the commodity stack in constructing a solar project, whether it's utility, commercial, residential, the foundation are those commodities that are going to be increasing. And so if you're trying to continually decrease the cost of electricity, then efficiency is the single biggest driver. And I think that the crux of it, that is why, this technology is so important and critical, because solar is not yet at 24/7 baseload power. And the reason is because storage, which is still falling in cost, isn't quite there, right? To be able to have enough storage to really get to 24/7. This technology, Caelux's technology, I think really enables a significant cost reduction that can be used to invest in storage on some of these projects to get closer to 24/7. And we did a white paper on this earlier this year. And I think that if you look out 5 years, I think that in different parts of the world, 24/7 solar is attainable. This will be part of the equation.
Well, even some hippie living off a grid 30 years ago, they had 24/7 solar.
That's true. They did.
So it's possible we could do it.
Yeah, it's possible. But like to compete with kind of conventional sources of energy generation, solar's got the lowest cost of electricity generation, but it's not the lowest cost on 24/7 baseload power perspective. So I think with the rise of data centers and all these different things that are going on, I think this is really an interesting and exciting thing to watch. And the savings from a double power layer module are going to help drive us towards 24/7 solar as a reality. And to me, that's amazing. It's really significant. So that's probably what I get, most amped up or excited about, is like this future where, it goes back to the off grid, but you have off grid or you're still connected to the grid with that, but also at a low cost. Whereas, off grid systems back in the day, those were really expensive systems, but you valued the power much higher, or you were just in a location where it wasn't cost effective to bring the grid to you. So it's going to be really exciting. The world's going to, as it keeps evolving and changing, it's going to be super exciting.
Well, very cool, Aaron Thurlow.
Yeah, great chat.
Yeah. And so Aaron Thurlow is the Chief Commercial Officer over at Caelux. And I've known Aaron for 19 years, I think, something like that, when we first ran into each other, when he was the most powerful solar person in the Bay Area, doling out those SunPower modules. And so we've come a long time since then, and we're going to go for a lot longer. And we're going to see 24/7 solar power combined with energy storage being the cheapest form of energy and a lot less time than it took us to get here. Probably next year. I know at my house, it's 50 cents a kilowatt hour, so we're already there. No problem. And energy storage is going down in price. In fact, in some ways, it's less expensive than an electric vehicle. Energy storage on wheels, plus it can take you somewhere. And so this has been a really exciting talk to have with you, Aaron Thurlow. And people, check me out, SolarSEAN.com, and get yourself NABCEP certified. And you can see myself and Aaron at most of the different solar conferences. And let's do it again, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. It was so great to have this conversation. Can't wait to get to your new training center.
Awesome, yeah. And let people know where to find you in Caelux.
Yeah, so if you want to reach out to me, you can find me at Caelux at Caelux, Caelux.com, or I think there's a link on the website to email us or email me, but I'm also on LinkedIn. Great to have this discussion, and Sean, look forward to reconnecting again soon. so we can, open up a lot more stories from the past. I think it's always fun to look at the past and then use that to see where we're going to go in the future, right? So
for sure, that's the way to do it. That's how to tell the future, is by knowing the past.
Yeah.
And we also have to know how to think in logarithmic exponential growth rather than linear, because linear is so limited.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Like you said, what did you say? 10,000x since you started the industry. So that's pretty good growth.
Yeah.
That's definitely not linear.
Been amazing.